Hello my loves and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Nina, and following last week's video I thought we'd keep things just a little bit lighter. Today I want to talk about all the vintage things I love but would never actually use. The idea came from seeing someone I follow on Instagram using a 1960s hairdryer and talking about how much she loves it. And while vintage hairdryers are super gorgeous, it's one of those things I would never dare to use, especially not on a regular basis. It made me think about what other vintage objects one shouldn't use, as beautiful as they are. Let's start with the one that inspired this video. Vintage hair dryers and hair tools in general. A hair dryer is basically a machine that combines electricity and a heating element to blow hot air. Why is it not recommended to use one? A vintage hair dryer might still work perfectly, but it lacks decades worth of engineering trying to solve one problem: drying your hair faster with less damage. So what are some important tools hair dryers or hair tools in general have nowadays? One of the most important things is multiple heat settings. Not every hair type needs the highest temperature. Being able to choose one of the lower settings is one of the best ways to protect your hair. The second thing is multiple speed settings. Airflow dries your hair too, and depending on the hairstyle you want, you need to choose how strong the airflow is. The cool shot button. This is important when styling because it can help your hairstyle last longer and reduce frizz. Ceramic materials. Ceramic helps spread the heat more evenly. You can find this in ceramic brushes, hair dryers, or straighteners. The best straighteners are the ones that are built with ceramic. Ionic technology. You see this on most hair tools and it's not marketing. Ionic tools produce negatively charged particles that help water evaporate faster and reduce static, which typically means less frizz and shinier hair. Tourmaline technology. This basically combines ionic technology with gentler heat. It's particularly good for thick or frizzy hair. And attachments. Modern hair dryers have different attachments for different needs. They absolutely make a difference. This applies to vintage curling irons as they don't have all the features that we just talked about. I have never owned a curling iron, but my mom has one from the 80s, I think. And the first time I tried using it, it was so freaking dangerous. Not only because it got really hot, but because it had all these combs around it, and I tried using it and then my hair got all tangled up in the thing. It was such an awful experience. I had to turn it off and wait for it to cool down and then just slowly begin untangling my hair. Do not recommend. Permanent wave machines, because they look absolutely scary as if they were out of a horror movie. I didn't know these things existed until I was investigating for this video. They were used in the 30s and 40s and people would have to sit there for hours until that hair got like a perm. And the super famous bonnet hair dryers or egg-shaped hair dryers that we see on the 1960s hair salons, as they are not generally safe to use. Pre-1980 models frequently contain asbestos to keep the machine from getting too hot. Plus, these machines didn't have automatic safety switches like we have today. If they get too hot, they won't turn themselves off. They will just keep heating up until they melt or catch on fire. Any vintage hair tool you get your hands on, investigate how it works, rewire it if possible, or just keep it as decoration. I can guarantee you there are better options nowadays, not only because they are less dangerous, but because they will protect your hair from damage. To keep things cold, all refrigerators use a special liquid or gas that travels through tubes inside the walls. Today we use safe modern chemicals, but back before the 1960s, refrigerators used sulfur dioxide. The problem was that if those ancient metal tubes got rust or got a tiny leak, that gas escaped into the room. Sulfur dioxide smells terrible, and breathing it can burn your throat and make you extremely sick. Old fridges were also built before anyone cared about saving electricity. They have terrible insulation, meaning they have to work 10 times harder just to stay cold, meaning your electricity bill will come like 4 times higher than usual. Vintage refrigerators are amazing in comparison to nowadays in terms of how practical they are. And of course we all want one, but if you really want one, you could get one from after the 1960s, or you could get a modern recreation of those refrigerators, which come in really bright colors and are absolutely stunning. Apparently, pre-2010 Tupperware frequently contains BPA and phthalates, which disrupt hormones. Worse yet, pre-2003 Tupperware often used heavy metals like lead, cadmium, arsenic, and mercury to achieve those bright yellow, orange, and red retro colors from the 60s and 70s. As the plastic degrades and gets that classy, sticky feel, those chemicals leach easily into food. I was so stunned when I read this because I know my mom still has Tupperware from before 2010, and my grandma has still Tupperware from the 70s that she will never get rid of. She loves her orange Tupperware. She loves this one in particular that is an orange huge Tupperware where she keeps like the cheese and the ham inside the refrigerator. It's one of those things that it's practical and that you don't see nowadays, and I can see why she doesn't want to get rid of that. But if you see one of those big Tupperwares, as beautiful as they are, especially if they come in those beautiful bright colors, maybe don't use it, because at least my grandma knows it has been with her all her life and she knows how she has used those Tupperware, but you won't know really what happened to the ones that you buy in the thrift store. So yeah. This should be common knowledge for anyone who collects vintage. Any ceramics and glassware from before the 1970s, especially if it has bright colors or raised interior painting, needs to be treated with caution. While cheap DIY chemical swaps work well to find lead on painted or shipped ceramics, they cannot detect lead hidden inside vintage glass or crystal. When in doubt, keep vintage plates and glassware on the display shelf and off the dinner table. I didn't know about lead until I sort of joined the vintage community on Instagram, and in there people go to the thrift store and they test for lead, or sometimes they just buy and then they check at home, and if they cannot really use it for food, they just keep it as decoration. If you didn't know either, then you should test it. Inside every electric blanket, there are long, thin metal wires hidden between layers of fabric, which create heat when plugged in. They are built to be flexible, but after a while they get super brittle and stiff. Every time the blanket gets folded or tossed around, those brittle wires bend and break. When those inner wires crack or fray, they can spark and create intense hot spots when the fabric melts. Modern electric blankets have smart computer chips that instantly shut the blanket off if it gets a tiny bit too hot. Vintage blankets don't have those safety brains. If those old wires spark or overheat under your heavy covers, they will just keep getting hotter and hotter until the blanket and your mattress catches on fire.
Things got a bit too hot to handle.
I think this is common knowledge by now, but I did went around and checked if the vintage electric blankets were like groovy in any way, if they had a cute pattern or something that you wouldn't find, and all the ones that I saw are solid colors, pastel colors, like nothing out of the ordinary. So I don't think people are buying them anyway, although people are selling them on eBay, so just be careful in case you don't know. I feel like everyone knows by now. And of course, do not plug them in if you have them. There are many reasons why you should rewire your vintage lamps. Modern lamp cords are typically wrapped in thick, safe plastic, but back in the day, cords were wrapped in rubber and covered in cloth. Over 60 or 70 years, that old rubber dries out and turns to dust inside the fabric sleeve, leaving bare electrical wires touching each other inside the cloth. So if you ever see like a fabric cord, just check if it's safe or not. Also, inside the socket, there are cardboard insulators and small metal pieces that hold the electricity. When these parts degrade and fall apart from old age, electricity can escape and touch the actual metal body of the lamp. If that happens, the entire lamp becomes electrified, giving you a dangerous shock when you touch it. This is also important because depending on where you live in the world, the electricity, like the voltage, will either make you jump, like push you into the other side of the room, or will make you stay holding the lamp forever until someone grabs like a wooden stick or something and they pull you away. So extremely dangerous. Again, if you have old lamps, vintage lamps, be sure to check them or take them to a professionals and have a beautiful looking lamp with a modern wiring situation. And while we are in the bedroom, let's talk about keeping cool. I'm sure you love 1940s and 50s metal desk fans as much as me, but did you know modern fans have finger warts? The gaps in vintage metal grills are wide enough to easily slip a hand through, and those rigid metal blades will not stop spinning if they hit skin. You might be thinking, I'm not going to place my hand inside, but they are quite dangerous if you have pets, kids of course, or if you consider yourself clumsy. A vintage fan can be a massive hospital hazard. Celluloid was the very first type of plastic ever invented. Because scientists were still figuring out how to make plastic back then, they used a chemical recipe that included nitrocellulose, which is one of the main ingredients used to make gunpowder and explosives. That basically means celluloid is crazy flammable. It doesn't just melt when it gets hot, it catches fire instantly. If you are straightening your hair and your hair iron touches an old celluloid comb or a hair clip, the clip won't just warp or melt. It can burst into actual flames right next to your face. This is super important because if you go to the thrift store and you find a comb or a hair clip that you really like, and you don't know this, you will find yourself in a really dangerous situation in the bathroom. Whatever looks like celluloid, try to make a test in an open space in your house if you buy it, just so you know that it's not going to be flammable or dangerous in another situation or in a closed space. Or just get rid of it. I would think that nowadays thrift stores, they just test things beforehand and they let you know that it's celluloid and that it's flammable. So better know that it's at least a possibility. Back in the day, people loved using those portable electric bowl heaters that plug into the wall and glow bright orange. Combining water with electricity is already a terrible idea, but these vintage heaters are next level dangerous. They have no waterproof coatings and they lack the automatic safety switches modern heaters have that shut the machine off if it gets knocked over. If you splash water on it or if it accidentally falls into a filled sink, it can instantly electrify the entire room. My grandma still has one of these electric space heaters and you definitely get like the super bright orange look. She never uses it in the bathroom, but it was really interesting to go through this list and investigate about all the objects that are considered now dangerous and finding out that my grandma has a lot of these. So, you know, I guess she knows how dangerous they are or where she should keep them. For her, it's just like, okay, this is functioning and I still use it. And yeah, maybe one day I can show you my grandmother's house and we can do a 1970s tour because she definitely has a lot of like kitchen appliances from the 70s and the Tupperware, of course. And yeah, those like tiny elements, electric elements that were popular back then and that are still functioning today. Just because something is vintage doesn't automatically make it better, but it doesn't automatically make it worse either. I think the fun is learning which things have stood the test of time and which ones are best admired from a safe distance. That was everything for today. Thank you so much for watching and for being here, and see you on the next one. Bye!
But they sure got some cuties incorrect.